Newscast.
Newscast from the BBC.
It's Laura in the studio.
And it's Paddy in the studio.
So we are recording just after 2:00 on Saturday afternoon. And Paddy, it has been another week of mounting tensions and more worrying conflict going on in the Middle East. Last Saturday, we were talking about, is a wider war now inevitable? A former official said to me yesterday, a former foreign minister said to me yesterday on the phone, let's get real. This is a war now. We shouldn't be talking about escalation.
Yes, because on Friday, that's last week, the Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah was killed by an Israeli airstrike on Beirut. That's just before our last weekend's edition. And 3 days later, on Monday, Israel invaded Lebanon. And the next day, Tuesday, Iran launched nearly 200 ballistic missiles at Israel.
And it's interesting, isn't it? What we wanted to do this afternoon was really think about Iran, because behind all of the different groups, Hezbollah, Hamas, what's happening in Lebanon, what's been happening in Gaza, what's been happening in different parts of Israel, what's been happening in the West Bank. This is, in the very big picture, about the very bitter tension between Israel and Iran. So we're joined this afternoon to help us with this is Baran Abbasi, who's a reporter and presenter from BBC Persian, because I think really we thought we'd try to give newscasters more of an understanding about Iran, what's going on there, what the intense rivalry and aggression between Iran and Israel is all about. And just first of all, I think we have to remind people that Iran, the Iranian regime and the Iranian people are absolutely not the same thing, right?
Exactly. The Iranian regime is very unpopular among the majority of ordinary Iranians. And the fact that Iran decided to respond to Israel's attack on Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah, his killing on Friday, and to launch a barrage of missiles at Israel on Wednesday. This is not something that is supported by the majority of ordinary Iranians.
Also unpopular, of course, is Israel, and that you were educated at the University of Tehran, I read. Now, I bet on the campus, Israel is seen as an enemy of Iran. I don't think no one is saying that the people of Iran could get by peacefully with Israel easily.
Well, a lot of ordinary Iranians, including students, believe that they do not have any conflict with the Israeli regime or any country in the world. So they believe that this is a conflict between the two governments, not the people of Israel or Iran.
But then it's more complicated than that, isn't it? Because it's not really just the buttons aren't just being pressed by the leaders; they're being pressed by the Revolutionary Guard, who are their own state within a state.
Well, the Revolutionary Guards are very close to the Iran supreme leader. The president might not have much power, but the final say in all state matters lies with the supreme leader, who is very close to the IRGC. They work together, and the IRGC is very loyal to the supreme leader. So yes, this was a decision that was made by the leader and the IRGC, not the president, but well, it's very clear that the government, the executive branch in Iran doesn't have much power.
So the IRGC is the Revolutionary Guards?
Iranian Revolutionary Guards.
Yes. So let's get back to basic principles, because I think newscasters are not being daft if they're struggling to sort of keep up with some of this, because it is a fast-moving situation and there's so much history involved. So can you explain then to people what the reason behind the tension between Iran and Israel is?
It all happened after the Islamic Revolution in Iran in 1979, when Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini came to power in Iran. And at the time, the idea was to export the idea of the revolution. And that's when Iran decided to create proxy forces in the region. And one of them was Hezbollah in Lebanon and also Hamas in Gaza, in the Palestinian territories. So before the revolution, Iran, the administration of the Shah of Iran and Israel had good relations. But after the revolution, everything changed. Iran so far has created proxy forces in Iraq, Yemen, Gaza, and Lebanon. And the biggest force, biggest proxy group for Iran was Hezbollah, that came under huge attacks in the past couple of days. That was very humiliating both for Hezbollah and for Iran.
I mean, the history is, isn't it, that the Shah and his family were put in place by the West after a coup, which the Americans and the British launched. So the history goes on and on and on. But I wonder if you can take us to the current, reading the size of the attacks, the difference between the attack in April, which was telegraphed to the Iranians, to the Israelis and to the Americans and to the West, what Iran would be sending, slow drones, helping the West and Israel to shoot them down. The difference between that and the attack that happened just a few days ago is that it was not so easy to be shot down. It was seen as an escalation from the first strike, which was absolutely unprecedented.
The first strike included slow drones, and Iran had given a 72-hour warning to the regional countries and also the United States. So Israel was ready and the region was ready, and a lot of the missiles and drones were shot down even before they reached Israel. And Israel said that 99% of all the projectiles were shot down. This time, Iran apparently did not give any warnings, and also they didn't use drones anymore. They were all ballistic missiles. So in terms of power and force, it was more powerful, and it seemed that Iran this time did mean to cause some damage to Israel.
And as we talk now at 2:20 on Saturday, the expectation is that an Israeli retaliation for that attack is coming in the next, maybe even in the next couple of hours, but perhaps overnight. I just wonder, how do you think that people in Iran will be feeling? Have you heard from anybody? We know it's very difficult to get information out from Iran, and also it's very brave for journalists like you to be reporting on Iran when you may still have friends and relatives there. But how do you think people in Iran will be feeling right now?
Well, they have been reacting on social media since Iran decided to attack Israel, because it was widely believed that probably Iran would leave it to Hezbollah to respond to the killing of its leader Hassan Nasrallah. The words that the Supreme Leader used after the killing of Nasrallah was not as harsh as before. So the Iranian regime was left with the option whether to respond or not. And a lot of people were hoping that Iran wouldn't. And the fact that Iran did so on Wednesday was hugely criticized by the Iranian people, who believe that Iran knows that it could have a devastating effect on the Iranians. It could risk a direct confrontation, a bigger confrontation between Iran and Israel, and it could even involve the United States, that might feel that even reluctantly that they need to support Israel. So there has been a lot of criticism of the regime for deciding to attack Israel the second time. And Iranians have been suffering under a lot of economic hardship, huge economic hardship. They have been under sanctions, and even before that, Iranians did not support Iran's efforts to create proxy forces in the region. They believe that Iran is sending funds and weapons to these groups, whilst the money should be spent on the Iranian people, on improving the public services and the lives of the ordinary Iranians. So the fact that now Iran is risking getting involved in a bigger war is very concerning for Iranians. There's a hashtag trending on among Persian-speaking social media users that is war is horrific. And then they're talking about what happened in the 80s and the 8 years of war between Iran and Iraq, and how devastating it was for the Iranian people. And but there are also, of course, hardliners. They are not the majority, of course. They are a very small minority. But they supported the attack by Iran against Israel, and they are supporting further attacks. And they are using the same hashtag, saying that, yes, war is horrific, but only for Israel. So and also the Iranians are using the hashtag to comment on the Iranian regime itself, because it seems that whenever the regime feels cornered, it becomes more aggressive in the region and more repressive inside of the country. And they are saying that, well, the regime killed hundreds of people during the last round of protests, nationwide protests 2 years ago. Many people suffered life-changing injuries. Many were imprisoned. And they said that, well, war is horrific, but we feel that we've been in a war with the regime for over 40 years.
Well, we're going to say that this is going to escalate. We know that we're headed for a more serious response because the Prime Minister of Israel has said Iran's going to pay a heavy price. Do we then expect any strike on Iran by Israel to then meet with immediate retaliation by Iran?
Well, Iran has said that it will do so, but Iran has not always acted according to what it has threatened. For example, in the first attack by Iran against Israel happened in April when Israel attacked Iran's consulate in Damascus. But a few months later in July, Israel assassinated Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh on Iranian soil. And then the Iranian leader that said that there will be a harsh punishment, but nothing happened. Iran said that it was exercising restraint because it believed that it was being dragged into a regional war by Israel. Also, it seemed that Iran didn't want to sabotage a ceasefire deal between Iran.
It all emphasises a weak US president and a weak United Nations. And in many ways, we're seeing the results of all of that come true just with weeks to go to the US election. So we say thank you very much to you. And for English-speaking and for Persian-speaking newscasters, we can read you and hear you on the BBC
website.
Great. How lucky. Now, this podcast will also fall very close to the one-year anniversary of the October the 7th attacks when Hamas attacked Israel. 1,200 people were killed, 251 Israelis and foreigners were taken, and still, 1 year on, 97 hostages remain unaccounted for, say Israel. The UN says Israel's subsequent invasion of Gaza has led to more than 41,000 being killed and more than 90,000 wounded. Hamas is prescribed as a terrorist organisation by many Western powers, including the United Kingdom. For our show, Broadcasting House on Radio 4, we're meeting two people who have felt the grief and loss of the Israel families and the grief and loss of the Palestinian families. And you have spoken to the mother of one of the hostages.
Yeah, I spoke to Idit Ohel. Her son, Alon, was one of the young people who was at the music festival where Hamas arrived and killed many people and took other people hostages. And I spoke to her about how her year has been, how she's been managing, and whether she thinks she will see her son ever again. She doesn't know where he is. She believes he's alive. She told me, as a mother, I feel that he is alive. But the last 12 months in the Middle East has just seen, thousands and thousands and thousands of people living perfectly ordinary lives being caught up in violence, being caught up in these bitter, bitter conflicts and terrible outbursts of violence. And it was incredibly powerful just to listen to her story. So we're going to play Newscasters a bit of it now. Can you tell us what happened to your son?
My son was kidnapped on the 7th of October from a shelter in Re'im, bomb shelter, when he was in the Nova festival with his friends. He got there around 5:30 in the morning, and about 6 he had to, they were starting to rockets flying everywhere, and they had to get cover. So they got into this bomb shelter, and during this time, they were with other, civilians like them. There were about 27 in that bomb shelter. And the Hamas comes and tries to throw grenades into the bomb shelter and fighting, with the shooting and everything. And during that, he was taken with 3 others. 7 only survived that bomb shelter. 2 of his friends murdered, and 2 of his friends survived to tell about it. And all the rest, sadly, were murdered.
Have you heard anything about where he might be? Do you have any information?
No, Alon was kidnapped alive. I have no information about exactly where he is in Gaza. We don't know. As a mother, I can feel that he's alive. but I haven't been in touch with him or know about him for the past 12 months, which is the 7th of October will be, a year, which is unbelievable.
What's it like for you having him away in danger, not knowing where he is?
Sometimes it's really hard to breathe when you think about it. Like, I don't know, if he's in the tunnels, you're thinking, how is he coping for so many months? If he's getting food to eat, if he's getting medicine or whatever, it's something that is not something that I can comprehend. As a mother, you have to look out for your kids and you have to make sure that they are safe. So in my situation, it's a heartbreaking thing. I wake up every morning doing everything I can to bring him home before I go back to sleep or at night. I think, have I did everything I could? And sometimes it's very hard to answer those questions. I haven't, I think, I try to talk to him, and send him my love. But the fact that I haven't listened to his voice and heard him and know where he is not, it's really hard. Sometimes I find myself either crying or find myself thinking, what else can I do? But I'm continuing to fight and advocate for him nonstop, all over the world and in Israel. And for me, that helps, knowing that I'm doing something, anything I can, to make sure that Alon is not forgotten, that everybody knows about him and how wonderful a human being he is.
She went on to tell me that his friends were getting a new apartment and he was meant to be moving into a new apartment. And I think I'll always remember, she said his friends are keeping a room for him for when he comes home. So for all of the people who've been caught up in this like terrible spasm in the Middle East, which of course it does seem every now and again, maybe once a decade, once every 2 decades, there is this sort of huge conflagration where people from right across that region get pulled into it. But the suffering of the hostage families is just impossible to imagine, but I think important to hear.
Oh, yes. And apart from anything else, many of them are fiercely critical of the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, for letting this October the 7th happen due to intelligence failures. And in many ways, if Jeremy Byrne was here, he'd say the country has been blaming him. And then what's happening with the war in Lebanon is that the public have been supporting the war on Hezbollah. So this is another reason why you have to hear from the hostages, because they are important to understanding Israeli domestic opinion. And when we next have Jeremy in our sights, Laura, we can ask him how all this war in Lebanon has shifted the public opinion and the problems that Benjamin Netanyahu was facing from criticism from the hostage families.
That's right, because actually someone in government said to me the other day, it feels now that the only break on Netanyahu is Israeli public opinion. And even that hasn't stopped him. He's been terribly unpopular through much of this year, but they went on to suggest if you look 6 months ago, Israel felt, someone in government was suggesting they felt sort of very, as if things were very, very bad. What they were doing wasn't necessarily getting them anywhere. The terrible bombardment of Gaza wasn't sort of changing, certainly wasn't making Netanyahu any more popular. And yet now there is a sense that Netanyahu does believe he's making progress. There is almost a pull on them because they've had success in targeting Hezbollah, the walkie-talkie, it's the exploding pagers and the successful assassination for the Israeli government of Nasran Nasrallah, the Hezbollah leader. And there's a sense in our government that they look at what Israel's doing and think, well, maybe actually he won't stop because they think they might be able to push to some kind of conclusion. But there's so much complicated diplomacy, politics, history in all of this. So tomorrow on the programme, actually, we'll have Jeremy on to help to help us understand this. But also we'll hopefully be hearing from someone from Tehran. I've spoken also to somebody who's been stuck in Gaza for the last year, very movingly, and hopefully will also be on the ground in Beirut. But it is a massively fast-moving, complicated jigsaw. And it's, as I say, we should say again, it's 2:30 on Saturday, and by the time we meet again tomorrow, it might be looking completely different.
I think that's absolutely the case. We are meeting a British Palestinian who's lost scores of his family have been killed in different generations by Israeli action in Gaza. And we're also meeting the daughter of a hostage, two hostages. Both the mum and dad was taken, although the mum was famously released. So that's Broadcasting House, a sense of Radio 4 tomorrow, and we have had a sense of what's on BBC One tomorrow.
We have, and then we will be reunited shortly after 10 o'clock for the Sunday edition of Newscast.
Goodbye.
Newscast.
Newscast from the BBC.